Hello everyone, and welcome to my review of a huge number of Journey to Un'Goro cards that have been revealed both in the stream this morning as well as in the past week since I got back from the Bahamas. Tons of cards to talk about today, so let's not waste any time and jump right in. We have Crackling Razormaw. This is a pretty sweet Hunter 2-drop. Obviously by itself, it's just a 3/2 beast for 2, which isn't great, but isn't terrible. We've seen, say Huge Toad and things like that see play in Hunter, in part just because you want to have a beast. So this is obviously just can come down on turn 2 as a 3/2 beast to enable stuff like Houndmaster potentially on future turns. It's also just a very powerful 2-drop later in the game. Being able to slot this alongside another minion, another beast, or just play it after you've played even just like an Alley Cat in turn 1. You play Alley Cat into Crackling Razormaw, you get to adapt Cute Cat, because Cute Cat is the one who survives. Let's be serious here. We all know that you kill Ugly Cat first because you want the Cute Cat to stay around. Giving that cat +3 health, giving that cat poisonous, giving that cat +3 attack. These are all really, really powerful abilities in the early turns, depending on what you're playing against. So I think that that's going to be a very strong curve from the Hunter, coming out and playing the cat into Razormaw. Razormaw cannot adapt itself. It's important to note that. It's kind of like any of the Battlecry minions, they can't buff themselves because they're not in play yet, because their Battlecry happens first. But it's still very powerful to be able to combine with really any 1-drop beast or any mid-sized beast in the mid-game, making your 2-drop more valuable as the game goes on, which is just very powerful. Next up, we have what maybe like my favorite card that I've seen in the set, which is Dinomancy. One of the things about Hunter that is consistently frustrating as someone who likes to play Hunter is that your hero power doesn't impact the board at all. You basically are very frequently finding yourself in a situation where you're like behind in the board, or your opponent has a bunch of healing, or some combination of these things, and your hero power feels like a blank, whereas your opponent's hero power feels very powerful. With Dinomancer, you get a hero power that is incredibly impactful on the board. You get to feel like, you every turn can gain an advantage that continues to snowball, kind of like, Priest hero power or whatever, like in terms of being able to establish and maintain a board. But this doesn't care about having like a big thing that survives. This cares about having any beast that just is around on the board, and it's just really, really powerful. Consider Dinomancy with like Rat Pack. You just Dinomancy up your Rat Pack, hit it into their guy, you get a bunch more beasts that you can then Dinomancy later. It's just very, very powerful for like a mid-range or controlling style of Hunter deck. It is a pretty significant investment because you pay 2 mana to do nothing, and then you have to spend 2 mana to give a beast +2/+2. But then every turn, giving a beast +2/+2 for 2 mana is like a really good deal. And it can effectively be a lot like Steady Shot as long as you have any beast that can hit your opponent, which is clearly pretty powerful. I mean, think about using the Charging Devilsaur. You Dinomancy that up, hit your opponent's guy, and then you buff it again, hit them again. That's probably not going to be a big deal. Probably not going to work out. But it is, I think, overall just a very, very strong effect. And I'm looking forward to making more sort of mid-range, control-ish Hunter decks that no longer just have to shoot my opponent in the face. They can whip some beasts into shape. Before we go on from Dinomancy, I do want to talk a little bit about one thing that I found when I was playing a lot of mid-range Hunter decks against a lot of other minion-based decks. Hunter frequently gets minions that are a little downsized compared to other classes. Often your minions don't really trade particularly well into opposing minions. You need to have some sort of buff to get through. You're playing, say, a 3/2 for 2 on turn 2, and your opponent plays, a 2/4, like a Wormrest Agent. Obviously, Wormrest Agent is a bad example because it's leaving standard, but like you find it very difficult to kill, say, a Frothing Berserker or a big taunt minion without using some sort of extra effect. I often had, say, Eaglehorn Bow in Hunter decks just because I wanted my Eaglehorn Bow to help me attack through opposing minions because my minions tended to be a bit smaller. I've even played Explorer's Hat in Hunter decks because I wanted that little bit of extra push over my opponent's minions in order to get through. And Dinomancy is like a Explorer's Hat on steroids. Like, you don't have to have your Explorer's Hat dedicated on one minion. You don't have to have this just like weak thing if your minion doesn't die that you no longer have effects from it, or you don't have to worry about your guy getting hexed or whatever else. You just have a hero power that gives this tremendous buff to get your minions through your opponent's minions. So I'm super excited for this card, and I think it's going to be very powerful. All right, next up we have Grievous Bite. This is a Hunter card. Deal 2 damage to a minion and 1 damage to adjacent ones. One thing that Hunter has struggled a bit with is the ability to sort of come back from being behind in a lot of cases. This, I think, is actually quite a strong card against Pirate Warrior, for instance. It's kind of a Maelstrom Portal equivalent if you are trying to play a mid-range or control Hunter deck, being able to clear off a bunch of small opposing minions. Obviously, Hunter has some cards that are similar to this, like Power Shot, like Explosive Trap, but this is much more controllable than Explosive Trap, and it's just cheaper than Power Shot. Costing 2 mana versus 3 mana is a huge difference. So I think that Grievous Bite could find a home if there are a lot of aggressive decks that tend to spread out in the board, like Pirate Warrior, where you need to get a little bit of extra damage. So cool card that I think may be a role player in the right strategy. Next up, we have Web Spinner 2.0, Jeweled Macaw, with 1/1 for 1 beast, battle cry, add a random beast to your hand. So this is a couple of things. One, it's obviously just a easy minion to play on turn 1 and not have to worry about the fact that your opponent can just kill it much of the time. It's not going to be a super high impact thing. But that's something that Hunter kind of needs, because Hunter doesn't have a hero power that interacts with the board. So very often you need to play something on turn 1, or else you're just going to get run over because your opponent just gets ahead and generally stays ahead because you're a deck that doesn't tend to play terribly well from behind. So with Jeweled Macaw, you get your 1/1 for 1 out there, and then you get a random beast in your hand, which obviously is kind of an interesting thing that mixes up play patterns later in the game. You could even Macaw into Macaw into Macaw into Macaw and just go off with your Hunter quest or whatever else. But I think just the most important thing is the fact that it is a easy way to get in the board early as a Hunter, which is something that the class can somewhat struggle with without just wasting resources. And this is obviously very powerful as well with the new Stampede card, which we'll get to, or just in the mid game, drawing your 1-drop and having it not just be a 1-drop, having it have this extra impact of maybe giving you a King Crush or whatever. Obviously, you're particularly fortunate if you get a King Crush from it, but just a much higher value 1-drop that isn't just sort of dead as the game goes on is very important to Hunter specifically. So I think this will pretty obviously be a card that sees quite a bit of play. All right, next up we have Raptor Hatchling, which is a 2/1 beast for 1 that shuffles a 4/3 beast for 1 into your deck. Obviously another card that goes very well with the quest, that you want to play a bunch of 1-drop minions. Also works very well with the Tolvir Warden, the 3/5 for 5 that gets 2 1-drops from your deck. If you're playing a deck that doesn't actually have a ton of 1-drops naturally, but also has the quest, or even doesn't have the quest, even if you just have Raptor Hatchlings and say Raptor Hatchling and the Macaw in your deck, and you're playing the Tolvir Warden, so you can play a Raptor Hatchling. Your Tolvir Warden will either get you something that discovers a minion, or potentially another Raptor Hatchling, or the 4/3. So it seems like the Tolvir Warden drawing 2 1-drops may seem weak, but when you're able to control only having 1-drops that are extremely high impact in the mid to late turns, like a 4/3 for 1 or a just get a random beast from your deck, can have much higher impact. Very powerful, I think. So I think this is a super good card, not necessarily just in an aggressive style of Hunter deck. I think aggressive styles of Hunter decks aren't necessarily going to want to play this because its immediate impact is low. But for a mid-range or a 1-drop quest-focused Hunter deck, I think this definitely has a lot of potential. This is a cool card for a mid-range or control style of Hunter deck. One of the things that Hunter typically does lack is card draw. And every time I build a Hunter deck, people are like, oh my god, you need card draw. And there aren't really good card draw cards for Hunter. It's just not something that's part of the class's identity and mechanics. But Stampede is a way that you can actually get some powerful card draw like effect if you're playing Hunter. And it not only is a powerful card draw thing when you actually sort of play it late game and start playing minions, but it kind of shapes the way that you want to play the late game. Because if you have Stampede, even just in your deck, you'll be much less likely to just sort of throw out minions in the later stages of the game to just try and fight for the board, because you do have the ability to draw Stampede and just start playing those minions and getting extra beasts into your hand. It's kind of like a lock and load, except for the thing that most Hunter decks actually want to do. I always found lock and load super awkward, because you need to spend 2 mana and then most of Hunter's spells were like reactive. So then like there had to be a board where you could actually play your spells to lock and load into, and it was like, this really isn't, something that enables me to refill meaningfully. In many cases, I feel like I'm just spewing cards off and getting no effect from them in order to get this sort of reload. But with Stampede, obviously you're just playing a beast and getting a beast, so it's going to have its impact because, well, it's a beast. It's in play now. So I liked Infest as a card for a lot of my my sort of mid-range Hunter decks. I was trying that for a while when I was looking for a card draw effect. And I think this is kind of like a more powerful, less situational version of Infest in a lot of cases. So definitely looking forward to it. I think it's obviously super strong in any deck that's kind of flooding. And we've seen a lot of stuff like that with Hunter this expansion in terms of tools that the class has now to actually play a bunch of cheap things that it needs to be able to get in the board early, but also allow it to have these more powerful tools and ways to use them late. And I think that may be enough that Hunter needs to actually, once again, be reasonably competitive in the metagame, but not in a way that people hate, which is Hunter just always hitting you in the face and killing you. And just, that it's not fun if it's, if Hunter is a strong deck and always is just like attack you, shoot, you're dead. If it's doing more things like this, getting to the late stages and swarming you with beasts, that's cool. That's a very different style of play than go face. Taste my skill. All right, next up we have Terrorscale Stalker. This card kind of bums me out. This is just basically a Princess Uhurin who costs 3 mana, and that's sort of lame to me because Princess Uhurin is like kind of a cool legendary. I've like played Princess Uhurin in some decks before, and it has been difficult to use in some cases, but like was still pretty cool. And Terrorscale Stalker is like just the same effect except on a different pile of stats, and it's just a different rarity. And it's like, I get it. I get that like this is a mechanic that you're putting into Hunter, and now you're making multiple cards for it. But it just feels kind of disappointing from a design perspective when a low rarity card is just like slightly different stats and cost than a legendary card, because a legendary card no longer feels particularly cool. And yes, there's only so much design space that you have in a game like Hearthstone, and you're going to want to make more things that go into the same style of deck that encourage this like death rattle focused play pattern. But it's just kind of a bummer that it's so similar to a card that felt special before. But I do think that this is a more powerful version, interestingly enough, because there's a lot of cheap death rattles that are strong in Hunter. Obviously, curving like Kindly Grandmother into this means that you're getting a lot of power, a lot of value for that. Or like, playing Rat Pack plus this, much easier to do than Uhurin plus this. So I think this will see play much more than Uhurin did. I don't know that the fact that it isn't a beast may be too big of a strike against it, because you very often want to ensure you have the threat of Houndmaster on 4, because Hunter really, really relies heavily on Houndmaster almost in every deck that isn't ultra aggressive, simply because you have no other real taunts. But if there are like death rattle focused decks that can afford missing Houndmaster on 4, I think this is a strong component of them. Next up we have Earthen Scales. This is a weird card. This is a Druid card. A Druid basically buff for big minions that also helps keep you alive. It's 1 cost to give a friendly minion +1/+1, then gain armor equal to its attack. We've seen a lot of Druid theme in the set, which is based around having big minions, 5 attack minions specifically. So one of the things when you're playing like a ramp Druid deck can often be you're playing against aggressive decks and you need to preserve your life. You need to actually find a way to stay ahead in terms of just your raw life total against those aggressive decks. We saw that with Feral Rage. It's obviously a powerful card to do that. This is less versatile than Feral Rage in terms of being able to kill a minion when you need to kill a minion early on, and then be guaranteed armor gain sort of in the late turns of the game. But Earthen Scales can kind of do a little bit of both for very cheap. Say you have a small minion early that needs to trade up a little bit, you can Earthen Scales to get a little bit of armor. Later on, you have a big minion, you can Earthen Scales to get some more armor. My guess is that this card probably just doesn't do enough. The fact that it costs 1, yes, you can buff a guy and get armor, which is like a very good deal. If you buff like a 5 attack guy, you're getting +1/+1 on that guy, and then getting 6 armor, and that's a very, very efficient. Especially if you're like maybe like making big Jade Golems late in the game with that. Like, it's a very easy way to stay alive. But one of the things about those decks is that you're playing a deck that has a very solid core of stuff that it's doing. And if you compare like the Jade Druid decks as they exist now to what they might look like with some of the cards gone, like Living Roots and Azure Drake are pretty much the only cards that are really core to Jade Druid that are going away. And I don't know if Earthen Scales is really a card that replaces either of those in any meaningful way in terms of what you're actually trying to do with the strategy. If you are specifically looking for ways to stay alive against like burn-centric decks, this could be powerful. I don't know that you're really going to get much work out of this in terms of the buff element of it, because you're still going to get like run over by ultra aggressive decks unless you have like a really big taunt. But it can be a way to preserve your life in those games against aggro. I just don't know if it's going to do enough. Speaking of 5-attack minions, Elder Longneck. I liked that Ben Brode made the reference that this could be Longneck Rager, because it's a 5/1 for 3. But this obviously goes very well with the things that care about 5-attack minions. It is a card that cares about 5-attack minions, so it works with the quest. It works with, it works with itself. You know, one Longneck, it can work to adapt the other. And the adaptations that are available are actually pretty strong to making this potentially a relevant card. I see some people joking, Magma Rage or Power Creep. It's not how Power Creep works. Power Creep is only a term that really refers to the sort of competitive level of cards. There were already cards that are better than Magma Rager, so making additional cards that are better than Magma Rager doesn't matter. But Magma Rager is also an elemental now, by the way, so Magma Rager itself is being Power Creeped. But the adaptations that are really powerful for this specifically, I think, are the health adaptation as well as the Divine Shield adaptation. Those can be, super impactful on a low health minion to keep it alive. If you get a 5/4 for 3, it's pretty strong. If you get a 5/1 Divine Shield, also pretty strong. So not a super fancy card, but I think that this will potentially be just a tool in the style of Druid Quest decks, maybe Druid Beast decks as well, in order to give them powerful tools in the early game. All right, a tool that is more powerful for Druids in the late game. Evolving Spores. This is kind of a very weird card for a token style of Druid deck, I would expect. Being able to adapt all of your minions obviously scales best when you have lots of minions. Could work very well with Violet Teacher style token Druid. Could work with Living Mana. If you get just a ton of guys and you're able to give them Wind Fury or +3 attack, it's super, super strong. It's kind of like an Enhancer Mechano, basically, but it's an Enhancer Mechano that you have much more control over because it's an adaptation. Even giving a bunch of small guys poisonous, being able to trade into your opponent's board. One thing I don't know about this is whether you get to adapt each one individually or whether you choose an adaptation for all of them. It's not entirely clear to me. But if it is all of them, then obviously it's a pretty high variance thing where you're really looking to score with the one thing that is the best for your whole team. If it were 1x1, and people I think are confirming in the chat, hi chat, that it is in fact all at once. So it's going to be a fairly high variance card, because if you get say Stealth on a board full of 1/1s, that's pretty miserable. Stealth or plus health in many cases is going to be really weak. Wind Fury is pretty good for a bunch of small minions. But there are just a lot of them that are not going to be super impactful for small guys. But being able to give them all a strong offensive power is definitely really powerful. So super high variance card could be very good in token decks, but I'm not looking to see this showing up super often, because I think you'd probably more likely have stuff like Soul of the Forest to ensure that your guys stick around. Next up, we have Giant Anaconda, who don't want none unless she's got buns, hun. This is a weird card. It's a 7-cost 5/3. Who you just look at 7-cost 5/3 and you're like, what? 3 health and a 7-drop, kind of awful. But it does put a 5 attack minion from your hand into play with the Death Rattle, which is a very powerful Death Rattle. I don't expect this card to be great because if you're playing one of these big 5-cost plus minion decks, there's a very good chance you're going to include, say, Ancient of War in it, or other things that have battle cries that make this feel much less exciting, much less impactful, because you lose that ability to get the battle cry from it. But you do get, for 7 mana, effectively multiple 5 attack summons, so it gets you closer to the quest reward for Druid. But overall, I just think this is kind of a relatively weak card, simply because your opponent doesn't have to attack into it and can just go face. Paying 7 mana for something that your opponent can just ignore is rarely a strong strategy, so I don't really expect this to be a particularly powerful card. So next up we have Jungle Giants, which is the Druid quest. Jungle Giants, you have to summon 5 minions with 5 or more attack. So obviously this is encouraging a specific style of Druid deck that you're looking to play. Big ramp things, which is kind of a thing that Druid wants to do anyway in a lot of cases. And then the reward is Barnabas the Stomper, which is a 5-cost 8/8 that reduces the cost of minions in your deck to 0. And obviously this is kind of similar to an Aviana type effect, but I think it's going to be played much differently. You often saw Aviana in these like combo decks that are looking to just accelerate and eventually play Aviana, Kun, Malagos blow you up, Cthulhu blow you up. And you could potentially do that with Jungle Giants. You could Jungle Giants in, like, say, a Cthulhu Druid deck, because there are a reasonable number of big things like Dark Arakoas that you could play to trigger this, to eventually Barnabas and go off with your Cthulhu and whatnot. But I think that most likely you're going to see this in a deck that is a little bit more aggressively slanted, simply because, like, spending a card to get this discount is a pretty big cost for a lot of combo decks, to need to actually have then triggered this with playing 5 guys that cost 5 or more, and then also assemble all your combo. There's just a lot of pieces to put together. But if you're playing, say, a like ramp, sort of beast ramp aggro deck with, say, like something like the Longneck thing that we saw earlier, you have like your Ancient of Wars and things like that. It's just a very, very powerful way to both get a cheap 8/8 for 5, and then suddenly the rest of your deck you are just able to spew out at that point. It's important to note too that it only reduces the cost of minions in your deck to 0, not the cost of minions in your hand, which makes it less powerful as like a combo tool, because if you draw the thing that you want to combo off, say you draw your Cthulhu before you play your Barnabas, then your Cthulhu doesn't get cost reduced. It only impacts the cards in your deck. So I think that that's kind of a failsafe in some way. You can't just play Barnabas and play everything in your hand. You have to play Barnabas, then draw things to actually play for free. So it's more of just a big ramp thing than a combo piece, I think. But anyway, super cool card that drives your deck in a very particular direction. It's weird that it's like, okay, well, do you play Druid of the Claw in your deck? Because Druid of the Claw is a 4-attack minion. So, is this something that influences that? Do you want to play... I mean, I haven't seen everything yet because I haven't looked at the Facebook album, but I know that, like, Savage Combatant, for instance, is a card that you would really want to play in this, maybe in a wild version of a Jungle Giants deck. But lots of definitely powerful cards that you can use in this deck, and you're going to be looking for card draw, I think, ultimately, to, once you play Barnabas, like, really start ramping up. So it'll be interesting to see, like, how those decks are built, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they come together. Next up, we have Shellshifter, which is kind of hilarious. The fact that it is, either a... I don't know what the art is for both of these, but the fact that it's like a stealth turtle, I guess. It's like he's hiding in his shell, and he's really angry or something. I don't really know. That's how he has stealth, I guess. But it's kind of a cool card, because sometimes you're playing in a matchup where you want to get aggressive. Like, say you're playing against either control or aggro. Against control, you'd much rather have a 5/3 with stealth than be able to hit your opponent in the face. If you're playing against aggro, Ascension is often pretty good. So I think that this is actually a card that might see a reasonable amount of play, because the flexibility is definitely worthwhile in terms of getting one of these two modes. I know that when I'm playing a Druid deck, that very often you really, really need to have the ability to go defensive when you need to. It's one of the reasons why, like, Druid of the Claw is a powerful card, because you can go bear form most of the time against a lot of decks. If you want to go aggro, you go aggro. So Shellshifter being able to go aggro against the control decks can be very, very powerful, but still keep you alive against the aggressive decks. It's also great with Fandral. I'm curious what it looks like with Fandral. It's like a 5/5 stealth taunt. It's actually probably pretty bad with Fandral against aggro decks. It's stealth and taunt. So don't play with your Fandral if you really need to stay alive. Next up, we have another turtle, the Tortollan Forager. So this is a battle cry. Add a random minion with 5 or more attack to your hand. 2/2 for 2. I like this. I think that it's a reasonable thing for, like, a Druid deck that cares about those big minions to play in the early turns to protect themselves, because you want to have some way to interact with your opponent's early game and also give yourself the ability to ensure you're completing your quest, triggering your things other things that care about 5 attack. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be good enough because 2 is often the Wrath or Wild Growth or Hero Power slot for Druid. Druid just has so many good ways to use 2 mana in the early turns that I don't know that you necessarily are looking to play a 2/2 because you're more likely to, you know, be in bad shape if your opponent just kills your 2/2 than if you just punch the guy with your hero power quite often. But maybe there's enough desire for density of 5 attack minions because of the quest that you decide to you know, put this in your deck. So I don't know. It's also I guess these turtle guys aren't beasts, they're turtle people. It seems like maybe they ought to be beasts because then maybe it would find a home in Beast Druid as well, but who knows? Here we are. Tyrantus. So this is the Druid legendary, a gigantic 12/12 beast for 10, can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So this is obviously a pretty straightforward card. It's a gigantic minion for a gigantic mana cost. We haven't seen can't be targeted on spells by spells or hero powers on that many big things. Obviously, Sagoth is the really big thing we've seen this on. Sagoth being a defensively oriented minion is usually something that you play and your opponent has to attack through in order to kill you. So the fact that it can't be targeted by spells or abilities just means you can't be sapped or whatever, but they still can very often just pile their minions in and kill it. Tyrantus, though, as a 12/12, obviously much bigger stat-wise than Sagoth and obviously much more powerful on the offense. The fact that it's a huge minion that can't be targeted is really important because it kills your opponent really fast. 12 attack is going to crunch down pretty much any life total really, really quickly. And it can't be polymorphed, it can't be fireballed, it can't be executed, it can't be Shadow or Death, whatever. And maybe you play this in the same deck as the Druid quest, and you get this guy down to cost 0, and suddenly you pull off the Druid quest, and you play a 0 cost 12/12 that can't be targeted by spells or abilities. It's even better than a 4-mana 7/7. But yeah, I don't expect this to be like a super highlight card, a superstar by any means, but it is a very powerful tool in a very controlling heavy metagame. The problem being, of course, that I think that it's very likely that sort of Jades are going to be better if that's what you're trying to beat. But maybe this ends up finding a home in the sort of big minion-based deck with the quest, where you don't necessarily have the same kind of Jade support to beat the control decks. You just want something like this as your big finisher. Next up, we have Cornered Sentry. There's a 2-cost 2/6 taunt, so kind of like a Dirty Rat. We expect there to be some sort of fanciness going on here, but Battlecry, summon 3 1/1 Raptors for your opponent. This is a really interesting card because it synergizes particularly well with any kind of Whirlwind style effects, whether they be actual Whirlwind, Revenge, Ravaging Ghoul, and also helps feed into things like Acolyte of Pain. If, for instance, you play an Acolyte of Pain, your opponent just is like, okay, well, I'm not going to make a minion, so you can't get value off your Acolyte of Pain. You play Cornered Sentry, give them 1/1s, your Acolyte of Pain gets to eat them, then you Whirlwind again, kill the other one, draw more cards. So I think it's a pretty powerful card. By itself, it's basically a 2/3 taunt if you can't kill any of the minions that your opponent plays, which is obviously not particularly strong. But if you have ways to actually mitigate the drawback, kill those minions, or get value off of those minions, it is extremely powerful. Can also work very well with Mind Control tech if you want to get fancy in terms of combos. This plus Mind Control tech is guaranteed to have something to steal. That said, one of them is very likely to be a 1/1, so you're probably not going to get super high value off that. So I think it's better with stuff like Acolyte of Pain, Frothing Berserker, things that you want to force your opponent to have small minions for you to get value damaging. Next up, we have Direhorn Hatchling, and this is actually a card that when it was revealed on the stream, I was just hoping it was a hunter card, or a neutral card. I guess I wasn't hoping it was a hunter card because it was revealed in the Warrior game. But I was like, ooh, is this a neutral card? It seems unlikely that it would be because it's just massively better than most of the other neutral taunts. But I was hoping because a 3/6 taunt beast with an ability would be incredible for mid-range hunter. You put that with Dinomancy, you just make these gigantic taunt beasts, which is just super powerful. But it's not, so we're gonna have to have this adorable little Triceratops-ish thing in Warrior decks. And one of the things that Warrior decks have tried to sort of push is taunt decks. And obviously, we'll get to the Warrior Quest in a bit, which is super strong, I think. But the key is mostly making good taunt minions. And this is a very good taunt minion. By itself, it's a little underpowered, a little undercosted, or overcosted. It's a 3/6 taunt for 5, basically a Fen Creeper. Fen Creeper didn't really see play ever, but if you think about it, the Cthulhu 3/6 taunt for 5 actually did see play in some decks. So it's clearly not that it's so far away from being good enough that you just need a little bit push over the top. And the fact that you get a 6/9 taunt in your deck is pretty powerful as far as the death rattle ability is concerned. And that's also just adds more taunt minions to your deck to help you do the warrior quest. So I don't know that this is necessarily a card that's going to see just generic play, but it is certainly going to see play in these taunt decks that are looking for a bit more density in terms of quality taunt minions. And whether those decks are good, I don't know, but they're certainly going to be neat to play and build because you get to turn to Ragnaros, fireball your opponent. Who doesn't love that? So the next card is Fire Plume's Heart. This is the warrior quest. You have to play 7 taunt minions with a reward of Sulfuras. Your hero power becomes deal 8 damage to a random enemy. It is a weapon, a 4/2 weapon, kind of like an Ogre Warmaw, but a little bit better. The battle cry is, in fact, your hero power becomes deal 8 damage to a random enemy. So you become Ragnaros in the sense of like a Major Domo, except you don't have the drawback of having 8 life. And important to note, even if your opponent kills Sulfuras, you retain the hero power. So this is like an outrageously powerful ability in a long controlling game. And if you're playing a deck that has a lot of taunt minions, one of the things that often comes up is, well, how in the world do I kill my opponent? Like I've played various, taunt buff decks or taunt discover decks with I know a guy and stuff like that, bolster, whatever. And one of the things that often came up is like, if I'm playing against another control deck, how in the world do I win? If I'm not just playing against an aggro deck and like outvaluing them because like I have just these giant buff taunt minions or whatever, and ultimately you just would run out of stuff and die. But with Fire Plume's Heart giving you Sulfuras, that long game you have just the best hero power available, which is just keep throwing fireballs at various insects around and blowing them up, and eventually just blowing your opponent up. So this is a card that I'm super excited about. I think that Fire Plume's Heart and incidentally Sulfuras as the reward is likely to make Taunt Warrior like a very, very viable deck. It seems like between this and the quality taunt minions that we've seen coming in Journey to Ungoro, this is definitely a strategy to be feared. Okay, next up we have one of my favorite cards in the set. Not necessarily like what I think one of the most powerful cards is, but I do think it's very powerful. Is King Mosh. So he's a 9-cost 9/7 with Battle Cry, destroy all damaged minions. So one of the reasons that this is one of my favorite cards, first of all, it's just this gigantic dinosaur. Gigantic dinosaurs are sweet. But secondly, I think this is a great tool for warriors, and specifically like control warriors, against the kind of decks that a lot of people seem to think just crush control warrior. Like Jades, for instance. I think that this is a great way, to play against a Jade deck. Having, say, this. Maybe you have this and a Deathwing in your control warrior deck. People are like, oh my god, you can never beat Jade decks with control warrior. It's like, well, no, you can, but you have to actually turn the corner against them and kill them instead of just trying to kill all your stuff. With the fact that Justicar Trueheart is going to be leading standard as well, we're going to, I think, see warrior decks that are more looking to actually take a controlling posture into the end of the game where they sort of flip the switch and kill their opponent, which is what we saw from Control Warrior for a very long time. Control Warrior used to be much more about kill your stuff, kill your stuff, kill your stuff. Okay, Alexstrasza you, Grom kill you, more than just kill all your stuff forever. And I think that King Mosh is a card that goes very well into that kind of deck, where you're just looking to, eventually your opponent has a huge board. You're like, okay, Whirlwind, King Mosh, kill all your stuff. Now I get to go on the offense. And that's, a very, very powerful potential swing against any kind of board. And obviously, if you have both this and, say, Deathwing in your deck, you get 2 potential just, like, wipe out your opponent's board style big minions. And that can be enough to even overcome, multiple waves of golems potentially. So I'm excited for King Mosh, and I'm definitely going to be building decks that use this big dino. All right, next up we have Ornery Direhorn, which is a new warrior card. 5/5 Taunt Beast for 6 with Battlecry Adapt. So Adapt is, a pretty sweet keyword on something that already has Taunt, because there's a lot of powerful things you can put on it. Just getting bonus health. If you get +3 health, it's a 5/8 Taunt for 6, and that's really, really big. That's, very difficult for a lot of people to get through. Divine Shield, you're getting a 5/5 Divine Shield Taunt for 6. It's better than a Sunwalker, which is a card that doesn't see play now, but has in the past, and is close to being good. And in fact, I think with 5 attack might actually be good. Stealth, not so good. Poisonous, probably not the best considering most of your opponent's things are going to attack into it and die. But they're, even just +1/+1, a 6/6 taunt for 6. It's pretty strong. But anyway, I think this is a solid card that obviously goes into potentially the taunt warrior decks, giving them more reasonable options to defend themselves. I think just giving warrior more good taunt minions helps solidify, that as kind of a theme for the class, on top of, charge weapons, damage things, armor, and just any mechanic that's good. Seems to be a warrior mechanic. But overall, I definitely like the sort of move toward taunt being a thing rather than just kill your opponent's stuff with spells, which has historically been basically what seemed to be the theme of warrior. And having them be more board-based control style deck, I think, is much more interesting. So I'm definitely excited to see where that direction goes. All right, next up we have the Tar Lord, which I really like. I really like the Tar Creeper, which is clearly the smaller version of this, which just has plus attack on your opponent's turn. This is a 1/11 taunt on your own turn, but it's a 5/11 on your opponent's turn. So if you're playing a defensively oriented deck, this is really tough for a lot of opponents to get through, because 5 attack is a pretty big number. 5 attack means that most minions that are commonly played will either die or take most of their health attacking into this. So it's also very difficult for your opponent to just attack into it with a weapon easily. If it were just a big health taunt, your opponent can just attack into a weapon or a minion and not really bother. But the fact that it has so much health and has 5 attack on their turn means it's really going to help keep you alive to the late stage of the game. Obviously, if you're playing a heavy taunt deck, and one of the things that I like about this in particular is that it works so well with the quest. Not only in that it is a taunt minion, but the warrior quest giving you the hero power of deal 8 something at random means that that's basically your way you plan to win the game. You're going to win as Ragnaros with your Sulfuros, just throwing fireballs at your opponent. And obviously, it's going to be difficult to kill your opponent with it because it has 1 attack in your turn. So I think that all these things seem to really fit together into kind of a very coherent style of deck that is at least somewhat minion based, which I like. I think it's important that the warrior quest does push warrior decks away from just being pile of removal spells and weapons, and more toward actually playing a board centric game, because I think it's a much more interesting style of gameplay than just killing your opponent's stuff all the time. Next up we have Sudden Genesis, which is 5-cost summon copies of your damaged minions. This card's sweet. This card is potentially a really powerful card that can give you a lot of board presence pretty quickly. We've seen this sort of effect in Blood Warriors already, and you could potentially see how Sudden Genesis is in some cases just going to be a better version of Blood Warriors. Obviously, main reason we've seen Blood Warriors to this point is copying Arcane Giants and playing tons of 0-cost Arcane Giants, but Sudden Genesis can get you an extra Grom, an extra other just gigantic minions. So the sort of thing that you want to do with Sudden Genesis and Blood Warriors is going to be a little bit different, because you're just trying to get the maximum amount of stats on the board most of the time with Sudden Genesis, rather than just getting the combo potential of Blood Warriors flooding the board with Giants. You can potentially just play them in the same deck. You have Sudden Genesis and Blood Warriors, and you literally just fill your entire board with Arcane Giants in a single turn, and that can be kind of sweet. But neat card. Not really sure where it would have a home other than that kind of combo deck, but definitely the kind of card that's really cool to see people experiment with. All right, well, next card is Iron Hide. This is a pretty straightforward card. 1 cost for 5 armor. We're going to be seeing the armor numbers of warriors drop pretty dramatically. Well, not really, because warriors don't really get armor these days because they're all pirates. But for control warriors, with the loss of Justicar Trueheart, far fewer ways to actually gain armor. Iron Hide is a powerful tool if you're looking to have a way to preserve your life against aggressive decks, or just combo more readily with Shield Slam. We already have Shield Block, which if you don't necessarily want to be using your actual resources to gain armor, is a much more effective tool. I don't think we're seeing Iron Hide supplanting Shield Block by any means, but it could potentially see play if there are a lot of very aggressive decks where you're looking to just buy that little bit of extra time with the 5 armor from Iron Hide.